All right, the time now is 7 p.m. We're going to call to order the Portsmouth Planning Board meeting of Wednesday, February 9th. Mr. Scholl, are you all set to go? Dee Dee, are you good to go? Okay, in accordance with the new public entity rules on remote meetings, we're going to announce who's present on the board for the record. So we'll start with Mr. Seth Palat is present. Mr. Ryan Tibbetts is present. Ms. Kathleen Wilson is present. Mr. Luke Harding is present. Mr. Dave Garso is present. And our newest member, welcome to the board, Mr. Chris O'Connell is present. So myself, Ed Lopes, we're all present and accounted for in person. Our solicitor, Mr. Galvin is via remote. Okay. First order of business is agenda continuances, modifications. Mr. Lozinski, there are none. Okay, thank you. Next item of business is the meeting minutes from the regular meeting of January 12th, 2022. What's your pleasure?
I would like to make a motion to.
Can you press the button?
I would like to make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
I had a question about.
Is there a second? Open it.
No, I have a question.
Yeah.
Page 2. Paragraph where it said a motion was made down at the bottom. Was it Mr. Harding that made that motion? Or was it Mr. Lopes?
I believe I took it directly from the minutes from the previous meeting.
Yeah,
Because we had changed that before, I thought.
right. I thought, yeah, that one, Dee Dee, that one's me. I made it first. I made the motion.
You made it in December?
Yes.
Okay.
That's actually the same correction.
Yeah.
Good catch, Dave.
Make a motion to accept the minutes with the correction, page 2, showing that Mr. Lopes made the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I'm gonna call for a vote by name. Mr. Palat?
Aye.
Mr. Tibbetts? Ms. Wilson? Mr. Harding?
Aye.
Mr. Garso? Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Okay. Next up is applicant and owner High Point Avenue LLC, AP 38, Lot 7D, High Point Ave. Development plan review and advisory opinion. Is there anyone here representing the applicant? She's on?
Yes, my name is Karen Beck. I'm with Principe Engineering,
And your address, ma'am?
27 Secana Ridge Drive, Tiverton, Rhode Island.
Thank you. Okay, you may proceed.
Okay, we have a lot that is in the Portsmouth Industrial Park. It is identified as AP 38, Lot 7D. It's approximately 2.6 acres in size. What is proposed is a 100-foot by 240-foot building that will be utilized by Kirby Marine. I believe there were architectural plans that were submitted to you. It's a 2-story building, predominantly metal. It's going to be surrounded by 24 feet of paved access driveway around it. That paved access is going to be porous pavement, so it will be maintained in order to reduce the amount of impervious surface area on the site, as well as treating for recharge and water quality drainage purposes. There are the required number of parking spaces at 18. We've got an outdoor storage area that's being proposed on kind of a backside farther away from High Point Avenue. This is a corner lot, by the way. So it's kind of tucked away. There's only one entrance that's being proposed. It's 2-way off of High Point Avenue to the west. Because of the steep gradient across the site, What is proposed is a series of tiered retaining walls to the rear and to the front, north and south. And by utilizing these 4-foot tiered retaining walls, it allows us to adapt the height so that it's not quite as stark in terms of someone standing on High Point Avenue. You won't see this large retaining wall. It'll be tiered. We are proposing landscaping. There'll be street trees along High Point Avenue. And then there'll be some landscaping along the building near the entrance. The roof runoff will be directed to an infiltration basin that's located in the northeast corner of the property. That will infiltrate all of the storm events so that there won't be any discharge onto High Point Avenue, but it will treat for water quality purposes as well as recharge purposes. We meet all of the town's requirements in terms of the building itself is less than the 25%. The pavement area, as I indicated, is not impervious, it is pervious. So we meet lot coverage as far as that's concerned. We meet the number of parking spaces. It's been reviewed by the fire department and we meet all of their criteria. There will be a septic system that is located in the southeast corner of the property that will treat the septic waste from the building and the staff. Other than that, I'm not sure what else I can tell you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for any member of the board? Mr. Tibbetts?
So just a few questions, if I could. I think I heard, so no variance, with the lot coverage, everything's conforming, right?
That is correct.
And I'm just curious, early in the process, but admirable on the permeable porous pavement, that's probably to maximize your impervious building footprint, but there are, I understand there's maintenance, farms responsibilities with that, like industrial vacuums or something. Is that something that you guys can speak to? I know it's early in the process. If that's reportable back to DEM or other agency to maintain.
Yes, we have proposed this type of pavement in several different situations. The DEM and CRMC in their stormwater regulations also allow for the use of permeable pavement. There are very definitive maintenance requirements. It has to be vacuumed, it has to be swept. But it has been used in a number of different instances throughout the state. And the maintenance requirements are included in what's called an operation and maintenance manual, which was also provided to the town, and it will be provided to the property owner as well, so that they are aware of the maintenance requirements for this sort of pavement surface. And we have definitely had this conversation with them, making them understanding the type of maintenance that's required, and they've agreed to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, any board members? I have a couple. So there was a design review board document that you went before the board on February 7th. I would assume you want to incorporate that as an exhibit to this petition.
Yes, I was not present at that meeting, and I had not seen the written comments from the design review board. I know that they had a couple of different comments. I don't know what all of them were. I'm assuming that none of them are excessive, so I don't see any problem with including that in the documents in front of the planning board.
Apparently a member of your firm was present, Mr. Principe, during the presentation, so I would assume there was no issues, but could we get a motion to include the design review board comments of February 7th as part of the record?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to include the design review board recommendations into the files as part of the record.
That was Mr. Tibbetts and Mr. Harding. We'll call for a vote. Mr. Palat?
Aye.
Mr. Tibbetts,
Aye.
Ms. Wilson,
One month, can we amend that we get the operation for the cleaning of the forest pavement, at least a copy of it?
yeah, we actually have it, so we'll do that next, if that's okay. So you say yay?
Yes.
Mr. Harding,
Aye.
Mr. Garso, Mr. O'Connell?
Aye.
Chair votes affirmative as well, so this will be introduced as Exhibit 1. My next question actually does get back to what Ms. Wilson brought up. We've got a drainage summary and a long-term maintenance plan, so what is the pleasure of the board? I believe they were on your desk. Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to add the stormwater management report. Is that what you're speaking to?
Yes,
It is exhibit 2.
and the operation and maintenance plan?
I will amend that to include the operation and maintenance plan, which would mention, as a
Okay.
potential, mention the pervious pavement, pavement and other maintenance requirements.
All right, is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, so we had a motion made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Mr. Palat,
Aye.
Mr. Tibbetts,
Aye.
Ms. Wilson,
Aye.
Mr. Harding,
Aye.
Mr. Garso, Mr. O'Connell.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. So the two documents are now incorporated into the petition. All right, any other questions for this applicant from any members of the board? So we'll go to the audience.
I have
Oh,
a question.
go ahead,
Could you,
Mr. Blunt.
could you speak a little bit to the, like the operations of the building? Is it storage or is there gonna be like maintenance, pressure washing, finishing, varnishing, epoxy, that sort of stuff?
I don't know if the property owner, Jerome Kirby, is available. I don't know all of the activities that will be taking place in the building. It was my understanding he was going to be present this evening in order to be able to speak to that.
Is Mr. Kirby in the audience? He's not here. Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Palat?
No.
Any other questions from members of the board? All right, we'll open it up to the members of the public. Any questions on this petition from members of the public? Michael, is anybody raising their hand on the?
No, not yet.
Okay.
If you're using the Zoom app, you can use the raise hand function. And if you're called in, you can dial *9 to do the same. Nope.
Nothing, Mike? Okay. Let the record show that there was no public comment from either the in-presence audience or on the Zoom meeting. Okay, this is before us for a advisory opinion to the zoning board of review regarding this petition. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to make a motion to give a favorable opinion on the plans with the stipulations that we have already put in place.
Incorporating the
Yeah,
two
incorporating.
exhibits.
Yeah. the two exhibits.
3 exhibits.
Three,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yep, three.
Okay, Dee, did you get that? Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, we got a motion made by Mr. Harding, seconded by Mr. Tibbetts. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. Mr. Palat?
Aye.
Mr. Tibbetts?
Aye.
Ms. Wilson?
Aye.
Mr. Harding?
Aye.
Mr. Garso? Mr. O'Connell? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you. All right,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, then the next petition is applicant and owner Aquidneck Club, AP 26, Lot 10, Willow Lane. Review the proposed modifications to a special use permit regarding the development of Lot 10, and also an advisory opinion to the zoning board of review regarding the proposed modification. At this point, I'm going to recuse myself from this petition because of prior involvement with the applicant, and the vice chair, Mr. Harding, is going to take over.
Good evening.
Question about the equipment club. It's because we all weren't here together for the petition. Let's go over a little history, tell you how we got here.
Excuse me, is your button on, Court?
No, sorry. Is that better? All right. So I'm going to go over a little history of how we get here because it is a little convoluted. And again, I know from reading all of the prior petitions and the answers, some of you were here for the Beach Club, some of you were here for Carnegie, but most of the Carnegie opinions all came out prior to 2009. And that only places a couple of us here. So way back when Kaiser Aluminum owned the tower, a gentleman went to develop that tower by the name of Mr. Patakiewicz. And remember that Kaiser Aluminum, Montauk Point, and all of the land that you commonly associate with the Carnegie Club or the Aquidneck Club, with the exception of the land owned by the Portsmouth Abbey, was zoned heavy industry. In our ordinance, they sought to put a hotel and convert the Kaiser building to a hotel. Hotels were allowed in heavy industry by special use permit. Golf courses are allowed in heavy industry by special use permit, and so are marinas, and so are certain clubs. So it made sense to do it back then as a special use permit to put a hotel with amenities. Remember, it predated the resort ordinance. The resort ordinance is a PUD. The PUDs come before the planning board in the first instance and not the zoning board. And many of you have sat on at least pieces of the Newport Beach Club petition. But this predates that petition. So what happens is map 26, lots 2, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 3, 4, 10, and 4H were all brought together as an 80-acre parcel. And you add the 320-acre golf course. And that is what is now known as the Aquidneck Club, formerly the Carnegie Club, and one special use permit grants it all. Every time there's a substantial modification of what was previously proposed or previously allowed, we have to go back to the zoning board who granted the original permit and say, may I modify that permit? We were doing this, now we're doing that. In theory, now that the resort ordinance is here, we could come here, but that becomes a hybrid because as you know, special use permits run with the land. So we have to modify that. So we are in front of the zoning board to modify a special use permit, kind of like we were building condos under an old ordinance. And our ordinance says on bigger petitions and petitions especially that involve drainage and road layout and things that are normally the purview of the planning board, we will come for a technical review committee and advisory opinion. And that's why we're here. So the technical review and advisory opinion at the end of the day, what we hope for is a motion that says all in favor of giving a favorable recommendation with the following comments if those concerns and comments come out tonight. So lot 10, and I have lots of witnesses to explain this to you. I have Lynn Small that's going to get into the septic aspect of this because she was the person who did the common septic for all of Carnegie Abbey and has spoke to you before on both Newport Beach Club and the Abbey. I have Deprete Engineering, Molly Titus. I have Jeremy Lake from Union Studios, the architect. I have Jeff Salenton and Chris Krellis from the Salenton group who are developing the property. So we should be able to answer all the questions. But I do want you to know this, we're not starting with a clean slate. Lot 10 is one of the lots of there. And you have seen it before, and the zoning board has seen it before. It is a 6-acre parcel, and the approval for that was 36 units. But like the resort ordinance is now, which really kind of got modeled after what the zoning board did down at the Abbey, was you look at large tracts of land, and it is the hope with the resort ordinance and this that we put single family houses, some of them, and we put some tower or apartment type houses and some dense places. In Newport Beach Club, remember like the tennis units, very close together, hillside units, almost like a full single family neighborhood. And then there's a couple of big apartment buildings. So what's happening in both developments is the big apartment buildings are not only going last, but not really all as marketable. People, even if you're coming for 1 or 2 months a year, kind of want your own space. I don't want my neighbor hearing my discussions with my wife. I want to be at least 10 feet apart. And the Carnegie Village, which is like that portion, if you drive into the gate and all of those buildings that are around the lake, they're this type of community, single family houses in close proximity so that other areas can enjoy open space. And the tennis villages over at Newport Beach Club. So that's kind of what this is. So what was approved were 3 12-unit buildings, the only 12-unit buildings, my bet, that you would find in the town of Portsmouth. They were 700 feet long and contained 2,000, couple hundred square foot units, 3 bedrooms each. They never got built. They weren't built. But now on this 6-acre parcel, what we're trying to present to you tonight and to the zoning board next Thursday is disregard the 36 units. We're going to try not to build those units. We're going to try to build 28 units. 22 of them are single family units. And because of the hillside, there's 4 duplex units for a total of 28. So you're going to hear that from what was approved before, the density, the amount of residential units on Carnegie has not only gone down in other places, but this particular petition will drop it from 36 to 28. The lot coverage for this particular lot was approved at 22.86%. We're still slightly over 20 and require a variance, but it is a reduction in lot coverage from what was there. You're going to hear the surface water runoff and drainage is a reduction. The number of people are a reduction, and that this type of unit, a single family unit, quite frankly, close to your neighbor, without yards, without swing sets, turns out to be just what Newport Beach Club and Carnegie have been advertising. They are homes that have a pretty high tax bracket for our town. They are homes that tend to be in the affordability bracket of not 30-year-olds with 3 kids, but older. They have yards that tend to not promote themselves to children in our school system. Quite frankly, they are resort single-family units that bring people into the resort, into Carnegie. We all know and watched Carnegie struggle for a number of years, and it now seems to be thriving. This brings in people. It brings in the type of people that will not only join the club, but have a vested interest in spending time there and living there rather than renters. And they're single-family units as opposed to those apartment type buildings that may more likely to be rented. So they're right for us for a lot of reasons. I believe they're right for us for a lot of the town reasons. And that's what we hope to get across to you tonight. Ultimately, with the advisory opinion, we have already been to the zoning board and they asked us to come here. So full disclosure, you recommended the 36 units last time and you wrote, we are concerned with density. They passed the 36 units anyway, but we are going to spend some time on density and how density at Carnegie has gone down since then. Certainly 36 to 28 is easy, but the 24 suites that were approved have not been built. The Carnegie Villages, there's been at least 2 lots that have been combined into one so that the density is less on both of those. There's at least 1 tower unit where a wall was knocked down and 2 became 1. So density overall at the village has dropped with these 8 units to 24 and the other 3 over 30 units. That changes the math. Another concern of the board was if you went under the new resort district, would you meet some of that criteria? You may want to hear from the planning board on that. The criteria for density, for instance, under the resort district is 1 house per 2 acres. I'll put on evidence for you that Carnegie is still at, 2 houses per 1 acre for the resort. Carnegie is still at 1 house per 2 acres. And that mainly is because a golf course gets to be counted as open space. And if you look at the other 80,000 square feet, it gets a little bit skewed because a tower has 79 units in it and is 1.97 acres. That kind of skews every other lot, right? But generally, the density overall on the 80 acres exclusive of the golf course still exceeds 18,000 square feet per unit. And overall, when you count the golf course, we are, again, 1 unit per two. So it's 80-some thousand square feet per acre. So we're nowhere near the resort ordinance. We need a variance in front of the zoning board for a setback. Remember that all of this is industrial land. Industrial setbacks were set back in the 60s because industrial buildings are more obnoxious than residential buildings. So we have a 60-foot front yard setback. We're going to tell you we hold that. But our ordinance in the zoning ordinance also says that when you abut 2 streets, you not only have 1 setback at 60 feet, it's a front yard, you have 2. So on Willow Lane, we're proposing 30 feet. That's the same setback if you were R20, R30, R40, R50, R60, and if you're in the resort district. If in the resort district, you only have a 30-foot front yard setback. So we are looking to tell the board when we get there for a zoning variance that 30 feet not only matches that area, but it matches the resort ordinance. And because it's a little unfair to have 2 front yards, that particularly seems to make sense. That 30 feet would be along Willow. For those of you that go down there now, if you go by the gate, you see a white fence that goes along the gate with the flowering bushes. It'll be matched on the other side. So you'll be driving down a very symmetrical match. The buildings on the left-hand side that are being put up now, if you've been there recently, there's 4 or 5 brand new buildings. They are same distance apart, same type of buildings. They're actually a little larger than the ones going on hopefully on the north side of the road, but it'll look pretty symmetrical and matching from the road perspective. And by the time we hopefully get all these nice people to explain this, that's what we'll be doing. But I wanted to give you a little background of what we needed and why, all right? So I would first call Mr. Jeremy Lake, who is our architect from Union Studio. And he has a pretty good slide presentation everybody should be able to see. First, Jeremy, could you just introduce yourself, tell the board a little bit about yourself, please?
Certainly. Jeremy Lake with Union Studio Architecture and Community Design, 144 Allen Drive in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. And we're here just to quickly give you guys an overview of our project. I know you guys have a full agenda, so I promise not to belabor this, but we wanted to just kind of quickly go through the designs and certainly open any questions you guys might have. So if you don't mind tabbing through. Again, this is our team listed. I know Court already introduced a lot of us. Just a quick introduction of Union Studio, then we'll talk about the proposed plan. And again, happy to take any questions. Union Studio was founded in 2001. Our overarching goal is to use our skills as architects and urban designers to make a civic contribution to communities of all types. So no matter what the project, we always have that sort of civic mindset. How does this plug into the larger community? How does this contribute to an existing community? How does this create a new community? If you go to the next one. We were founded in 2001, so we're 20 years old. I've been there for 10 of those years. We're based in Providence, but we do work all around New England. Actually, are doing more and more national projects. I have work right now in Oklahoma and out Washington State, down in Virginia. So our practice is growing, which is great. Next slide. And we do a wide range of project types. The upper left is the Tiverton Library that's relatively new. You guys might be aware of. Bottom right is the Water Rower headquarters in Warren. But a lot of these images are of housing. I think our bread and butter is housing or mixed use. We do private market rate housing, affordable housing, student housing, sort of the full gamut of that. So this kind of project is right up our alley. Next slide.
That's not to say this is student housing and
No, not in this case.
kind of high end in this neighborhood, as you know.
So just the project location, again, I think that you all are familiar with where it is, just over the tracks as you're going down Willow Lane, just to the right. Next slide. Currently, the site is undeveloped, so there's nothing out there at the moment. The exception is that Seashell Drive that connects you from Willow Lane over to West Shore Road that runs along the edge of the train track. We'll be keeping that same roadway in place.
If I may interrupt. For those of you familiar with Carnegie, that Seashell Road starts at the gate. If you came out of the gate and failed to negotiate going left of the marina or right to West Main Road and drove straight, You'd go by a small shack that is the bathroom for the guard shack, and that clam shack road. That clam shack road is part of this lot. It's part of the 6 acres. And there is an agreement that you approved back with the Newport Beach Club that is kind of that transition way so that you can drive from the beach club to the Carney or Aquidneck Club, and from the Aquidneck Club to it goes in that back gate off of Willow, which enters the riding arena. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no worries. So again, nothing out there at the moment. If you want to go to the next slide, you can see the grading. Obviously, this was tabled at one point, so you can see it's relatively flat to the right, but there's a little bit of slope more to the left side. Actually, if you go to the next slide, we've tried to highlight that. So there's the flat portion of the site as a result of it being, it's relatively flat. Nothing's truly flat. That suggested one particular type of unit type that should be in that portion of the site. If you go to the next. And then there was about a third of the site that was sloped. So in those areas, the hill is going up from where we are. And so if you were in sort of the front of the unit, you would be essentially 10 feet lower than when you get to the back of that unit. So the house that's up on Elliott Lane is probably a good 15 feet up higher than the majority of our site.
Just no height variances are required, because for those of you that know, the height variance is less under the old ordinance than it is, the height requirements are less than they are in the resort district. The resort district would allow 40-foot houses, I believe. We're at 35 in the rest of the town. All houses are proposed at 35. When you have this in the side of a grade, the front of your house might be 38 and the back of your house might be 28. Our ordinance says go halfway, measure at half grade and make sure, but no height variances are required. And because one of the zoning members said, are you picking and choosing between the resort ordinance when it helps you and the zoning ordinance when we're not, except for to point out that your 30-foot setback is something that's in the resort ordinance that I'm trying to get. We are not picking. We are not asking for any increases under the old ordinance that wouldn't be allowed under the new one. And in fact, are honoring the old ordinance as to height and lot coverage, both of which are increased on your resort ordinance.
So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So this is the community that we're proposing. So again, as I mentioned, the flatter portion of the site, we have those are 1.5-story cottages that I'll show you in a moment, that are slightly larger footprints, but again, at a lower scale. There's 20 of those. And then when you get into that hillside on the western edge of the site, 2 of those units are standalone single family. And then we have 6 units that are paired as a series of 3 duplexes. So again, those sort of nestle into the hill so that you would enter the lower level from the front and could basically exit the second floor, if you will, to the backyard area. And we took advantage of that in the way that we designed those units. As you can see, the existing connection from Willow Lane over to West Shore Road is still in place. That's effectively the drive that enters into the community. And then we have effectively 2 small little loop roads that connect back and around to that. The units all front onto those roads. And we've also included a pair of shared green spaces so that there's some sort of common outdoor space, some gathering spaces, area to take your dog out, whatever the case might be, that we've included. That also just gives some variety and character and interest to the community as you make your way through. We've also included sidewalks on one side of the street. They're just internal, but just for neighbors to be able to get from one house to the other or to take their dog for a walk without necessarily having to walk in the street. Although of course the traffic counts here would be so low, I'm sure it'd be more than fine to sort of walk even in the street. But we thought that was a nice sort of walkable feature that we wanted to incorporate.
Just while that slide's up too, I want to point out a couple of things. Remember what our setbacks are in an industrial area, not a regular area, but industrial. They are 60 foot for a front yard, and you can see the top of that screen. This property abuts West Shore Road. Because it abuts West Shore Road, even though it's not the front, we have a 60-foot requirement. We've held that. So we've held a full industrial standard on West Shore Road, which is the portion of this development that faces the general public. When you go on the right side, which is going to be east, remember we maintain, that's our sideline. We not only maintain our 30 feet, but that's where we abut the railroad. The railroad's an additional, in some cases, 50 feet, in some cases 30 feet, but it really is over 80 to 100 feet to the nearest house because of the benefits we have and the road that's already in. When you go first to the west, that's where that hill is. There's a 30-foot sideline setback in industrial. It would be 15 or 20 if it was residential. we maintain more than the full 30 and it would be requiring no variances. So we're trying to nestle this in with nothing. When you come to the south, that's our problem. When you come to the south, because we have a dual front yard requirement, now we chose to get the variance in the area that most affects ourselves, because a Quidnet Club is a Quidnet Club, and obviously the people on the other side of the fence who are the same distance away don't necessarily have any problem with us. We're co-petitioners. But rather than pick a side of a variance that affected a neighbor who's not family, if you will, the variance is for 30 feet for family. It would not be a variance under your new ordinance. It would not be a variance if we weren't required to have 2 front yards. It is only a variance because under the old ordinance, we need a front yard every time we have a street. Neither of them are really front yards because the front yard clamshell and driveway road. But that's our ordinance. And if you want to make a comment on that particular variance, that would be our argument on that, all right?
Great. You want to go to the next one, please?
Could I just ask one question?
Certainly.
Go back to that previous slide. On the Willow Lane side of those houses that are there, in that picture, it looks like there's concrete or something, like there's an entrance from Willow Lane, like as if there's driveways on both sides of the house. In a lot of these other things, it doesn't give that look, but here, what is that between Willow Lane and to the house?
Yeah, so we drew that like there might be a little rear patio. We have a rear
Okay,
porch back
but it's
there. So
not
if it was
an
like a
open-
backyard.
No,
It would be a
no-
front
no
entry.
entrances of any kind.
Yeah, so we actually have a few feet of grade that actually go up before you get to those homes. And I
Yeah.
think he mentioned we're going to propose a fence and landscaping similar to there is on the other side of the street. So those will really be screened back there, which is why we felt like they would actually work kind of nicely as just some small private rear yards. They aren't huge backyards by any stretch. but-
Okay.
And in fairness, also, there was a design review conceptual, and there was a letter that was sent, and the representations were that white fence that's identical to the one on the other side and the matching vegetation would look nice. I think really the only comment the design review had is whether we had internal sidewalks to walk around, whether they wanted a sidewalk to get over to Willow, and whether Willow itself would have a sidewalk, and they wanted us to look at the practicality of that. There's no sidewalk anywhere else on Willow. For those of you on Willow, remember Willow was designed as an industrial street, so it's the widest street in all of Portsmouth. It's probably, the court lives down there, as you know, safest street to jog on in all of Portsmouth because it really is 4 cars wide and a 15-mile-an-hour limit. So I'm not sure they're necessary, but because the design review said you might want to consider them, you obviously, as the planning board, can make some recommendations on whether or not you want to start a sidewalk on the piece that abuts us. Quite frankly, even though there's no sidewalks anywhere else, and even though the width of that road is such. But I do believe that you'll find that in the design review discussions on whether we should consider it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll keep going, but again,
I
happy to
keep
take.
interrupting you, I'm
keep your-
sorry.
No, I don't mind at all. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So this is just sort of a quick overview of the 2 unit types that we're proposing. So on the left, those are the 1.5-story cottages that make up 20 of the 28 units. I know the plans are tiny, but the point is there's a 2-car garage there to the right, but to the left, you get your dining, kitchen, living spaces that go all the way through the unit, and a primary bedroom on the ground floor back behind the garage, so back towards the backyard. A stair going up, you have a pair of secondary smaller bedrooms upstairs, the grandchildren's beds, if you will. And we have a space over the garage that is going to be offered. That will probably be an unfinished space, but probably the option of finishing it. So if they want, it's great storage opportunity. Certainly could be a bonus room or a home office.
But restricted from being a bedroom typically by the zoning,
Right.
by not allowing closets or doors because of the size.
Right. So that's the 1.5-story unit. And then on the right, we're showing the units that tuck into the hill. Shown here as a single family detached, but when they are duplexes, they are essentially mirrored by the 2-story portion. So they're attached by the smaller wing. In that case, you have 2 1-car garages. So a 2-car garage on the ground floor, plus a bonus room that's sort of tucked back into the hill. Again, storage, home office sort of use. The second level, which is really the primary living level, living, dining, kitchen, a 3rd bedroom. It's not a particularly large bedroom. I think it's going to be a great candidate for a home office on that level, and the ability to come out the back of those at the level of grade behind. So again, you could have a little rear patio, a little space out back. And then on the top floor, we have really the primary bed suite with another decent sized bedroom up there as well. One of the things we intend for these is to provide the option of a residential elevator because it is a 3-story unit. Given the likely age of the buyers we're considering, it'll be their choice whether or not they want to include it or not. Certainly something we considered knowing the likely demographic of this project. So next slide, please. I think this is the last thing, which is just a perspective aerial view of the community. So there in the foreground, you see that first green space coming off of the Shell Drive, which is what's in the foreground. The train tracks there sort of front left. You can see that little gate guardhouse in the top left corner where you're coming off of Willow Lane. Just see how the streets interconnect, the homes out front onto these spaces and streets, and just gives you sort of a relative sense of the scale and the spacing of the units themselves. So this is very much a little village community sort of concept, if you will. So I think that's everything. Certainly we have other slides here available if we need to get into any of the technical things, but certainly, again, hopefully that's an okay overview of the project to give you a sense of what we were going after.
And as of now, we are gated to go into the Carnegie community. It's manned gate. There is a non-manned gate in Carnegie Heights. There is a non-manned gate that keeps you from Newport Beach Club. So this isn't through traffic for the general public. Because there's gates on both sides and so close to the gate and the security that's allowed by that, we have not proposed a gate just for this, for fear that, quite frankly, if you're driving from the Newport Beach Club, you have to get a gate at West Main Road. You got to get out of a gate to get across West Shore. You get back on a gate to get on a clamshell, off a gate to get off the clamshell, and through the guard to get to the house. Because we're so close to the house on one side and the gate on the other, which we feel will control public through traffic, because we can't stop that, but for the neighbors, of which I may be one, you're not trying to necessarily make it a heavy traffic zone. That's the thought process behind no gates on this clamshell road unless they become necessary. It is private, though. There'd be no tax upon the system of these private roads because it's all contained on the private lot. There's no snow plowing to the town. There's no problems to the town. It's a homeowners association that would take care of that.
And Ms. Small will show us what the septic is going to be. And we'll wait for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I can bring Lynn up only because you said septic. I'll start with, you are all aware from this that this is a individual treatment plant for the Aquidneck Club. And it not only covers the tower, but the 14 residential units, the 22 villages, and all the proposed, I believe, 22 Carnegie Harbor Drive units, the 79 tower units. It was proposed and also includes capacity for the 24 Chateau Suites, the 21 units now down to 19 known as Carnegie Village, and the 11 single families on Heights. Everyone is tied into it, I believe.
Lynn Small, Northeast Engineers, 6 Valley Road. My office has been working on this project since actually before I worked there, which is in 1998. So I think they started in 1997. In 2001 to 2003, we worked with the DEM to create one of the first privately owned wastewater reuse systems in Rhode Island, which includes a wastewater treatment plant and a reduced leach field. And the idea is that during the seasonal, which is your peak use out at the overall development, we would use the treated wastewater in the golf course irrigation system. And we do that at night when no one's on the course. The system has proven to be very, very successful. We get monthly reports from the maintenance people of the plant. Those reports come both to my office and to DEM. The goal is to make sure that we're using the reuse system the way that we had projected back in 2003 when we permitted the wastewater reuse project. And to ensure that the off-peak flow never exceeds the constructed leach field capacity. So right now, this site has approximately 67,000 gallons of flow that has been permitted through it at one point. That includes a few permits that have since expired, but to provide a conservative review for this board and for DEM, we've used those original flows because they're the higher ones. And this includes the 24 3-bedroom Chateau Suites project that's just between the tower and the marina parking on West Main Road.
Those are approved but not built.
And they're actually since expired, both here and at DEM. So that capacity, which we had allocated over 8,000 gallons for, is not actually going to be built. I'm not sure that it ever will be re-permitted either. This also includes the yacht club, which included at 1.6 residential units. That project will be substantially reduced. It's in the works at a concept level at this point, but we kept that higher flow. And for the lot 10 that we're looking at now, we've modeled it for 28 3-bedroom units, which proposes about 9,600 gallons. The wastewater treatment plant has a capacity between 80 and 90,000 gallons a day. With all of these flows that I've just explained, plus what's already on site at 100% capacity, we're at 77,000 gallons a day. But the actual flow that you see through that plant today is closer to, it goes all the way down to 1,000 gallons in the wintertime, and then all the way up to about 15,000 gallons to 20,000 gallons in the summertime. So we're way below capacity on this project. And the wastewater reuse is working well. And we're going to be meeting with them again to make sure that they're using it even more. We will continue to monitor the flows that come into the plant that are going to the wastewater reuse, and that are going to the leach field. There's no restrictions on the site that say it has to be seasonal. It's just what we expected and what we're seeing has proven that our analysis, you have about 20% of occupancy in the winter months, and it goes up to 80 and 100% during the summer months. People spend, I think the numbers were an average of 3 to 4 weeks on site for each of their units. I do expect that those numbers could go up a little bit higher, but like I said, we analyze this monthly to make sure that we'll never go outside of our permit allowances. There are also triggers in the state permit that are for the overall project, regardless of who builds what. They're linked to the plant and the wastewater reuse system that basically said, when you get to a certain flow, you have to submit to build more leach field. And that happens if it happens in the winter months. In the summer months, this project at 100% capacity does not create enough of wastewater that a golf course uses in one day. Golf courses use a lot of water. This might be one of the only ones on the island that don't have to buy water from the town, one of the towns. So that's basically a summary of the wastewater system on site. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I'm
We'll just
very
wrap up, so-
familiar.
But 28 units uses less than 36 units.
Yeah, yes.
And it was approved before, at least through the zoning board and the planning board, for 36 units. And it was approved on the speculation back in 09 that this is what we thought the system was going to do. And this is what we thought it was going to, how it was going to produce. And in fact, all of our estimations have been extremely conservative, and we're using less water than we are designed for.
True.
And there's an auxiliary backup plan of the backup plan as typical for DEM.
That's correct.
And this is just maybe a small thing. In the previous 36, how many bedrooms were total and versus?
Great question, exactly. Well, all 3-bedroom units were proposed, so 36 times 3 would have been 108.
Yep.
And it is now 28 times 3, which would be 84.
Okay.
So it is a reduction of
Yep.
exactly the unit. And there's no, if you look at the square footage of these, they may actually, the footprints may be a little smaller. So, you know, we all know that a 3-bedroom house with the wrong design could turn into a 6-bedroom house. But
Right.
You're more concerned on that when you have a place that goes to families that might be housing year-round 4 or 5 kids. There's nobody in either Newport Beach Club or Carnegie doing that. They're mostly people who've raised children who bring their grandchildren in for the tolerance level time of 3 weeks.
Yep. Okay.
Erase that if my grandkids are listening. I was gonna say, I sported them a week.
Sure. Yeah, you press that on.
On the northeast corner of the property, it looks like you're connecting to a culvert on state right of way, which is the railroad. You might be needing a DOT permit for that.
If not interrupting at all, Northeast Engineering is the septic consultant, but because of their relationship with the Quidnick Club, they're doing that. And because the development group, the Sound Group, Dupree Engineering is here. Dupree did all of those tie-ups and those things. I'm gonna put Molly Titus on next, and she's the one that's gonna address that.
Right.
She'll tell you that. Any more questions, Lynn, I guess, and then I'll bring Molly up. That's all right.
We're good.
Okay.
So a couple of things that the zoning board were interested in before we put Molly on. One, you approved the Newport Beach Club. When you approved the Newport Beach Club, as you know, we all calculated the square footage of developable land area and how many units they could have in those things. One of the drainage systems that was always proposed, and an easement goes across West Shore, across the railroad tracks. It was all installed, and there was an area that was defined on your original plans at Newport Beach Club. As long as this system gets approved in the size that we are proposing it, that pond stays the same as it was on the Newport Beach Club. If that pond doubled, for instance, and it doubled in an area that wasn't already subtracted from your Newport Beach Club developable land area, that may affect your number of units, because remember how close we were on some of those things. We are not proposing that it is, and recognize that if it does, that we would have to come back with Newport Beach Club and seek some type of modification, but we do not believe we are going to have to. Remember, to be here, a Quidnick Club master is on board, or we wouldn't be here. And Newport Beach Club has done, has the easement agreement in place. So, and the railroad tracks has the easement agreement in place. It was all done, it might not have been pointed out as much in back in the day, because Brian O'Neill owned both. And when,
Yep.
so he was here telling you what he was doing, as opposed to now having two factions telling you what we have agreed on.
The culvert was already built within the easement.
Yeah, and the culvert is already built within that easement. So because he had planned to do this back in, remember, this original, the original approval for these units was 2009.
Yeah.
So it goes back a ways, but. All right, so Molly, as the engineer, just to hit some of the more easy ones first, could you tell me about the road layout, the width of the road, the specs of the road, and particularly your meetings with the fire department and their approval as we've laid it out?
Absolutely. Molly Titus, Dupree Engineering, 2 Stafford Court, Cranston, Rhode Island. I'm a registered professional engineer and been practicing for 25 years. The proposed site layout is internal private driveways. We're proposing 20-foot pavement width in all the circulation roadways. The Seashell Drive is wider to provide more the existing width of the Seashell path. These standards are a reduction from the subdivision regulations, but are in keeping with the rest of the Carnegie area and match the roadways within the development at this time.
would also remind you that the resort ordinance, I believe, calls for 24 feet, and the Newport Beach Club, this board approved a specific variance down to 20 feet. So these are consistent with both the Newport Beach Club inner roads and Carnegie inner roads. Remember the main arteries down Newport Beach Club? I don't know if you reduced all of those, but I do, like the main artery from the gate in Carnegie is wider. It's when you turn to the tower and when you turn into the villages that this would be consistent.
The turning radii and 20-foot pavement width are satisfactory with the fire department. I obtained a truck turning radius diagram from Mark Remos, the captain of fire prevention, and we've run a truck turning movement through the site, through all the roadways to make sure it's adequate for their access. We also provided them with a full set of design plans for their review. Dupree Engineering has designed the drainage system for this site. I know there's a lot of concern with the connections to Willow Lane, previous developments, and what has been permitted in the past. As a conservative measure, we took the site as it stands today as the existing condition. We did not use the previous design flows. We did not take any credit for what went to Willow Lane under previous designs. So our design point at Willow Lane is considerably smaller. It is one strip of grass along the front edge, and that's what we've maintained as a flow to Willow Lane under a future condition. We've designed a large underground detention system that you can see underneath the northern grass area on this site, and that serves to meter the flow out of the site to match existing condition rates. We cross to the drainage area Court spoke about of the northeast corner. That's a sand filter that provides secondary water quality treatment before discharge to a coastal wetland. So we don't have volume calculations to perform, given that it is a tidal and coastal flow area, but we meet all the state water quality requirements.
We require coastal and state approval.
We will be going to CRMC. We are straddling the jurisdiction line, which is the railroad tracks. The site falls on CRMC side of jurisdiction. The wetland falls on DEM. It is our understanding CRMC is going to take jurisdiction of the whole project.
And I asked that question, no one the answer, but this
Yeah.
board also knows that thou shalt not apply to coastal resources until such time as thou has permission from the town on exactly what could be built if coastal approves it.
Correct.
So this
Unlike,
is a
yeah.
preliminary.
right, unlike DEM, we have to have full zoning approval prior to applying to coastal resources.
So any recommendation that you have or any tacit approval we acquire from the zoning board is always conditioned on coastal approval as proposed. And if there's a deviation from it as it was proposed, we would need to return.
Anything additional? or any
Actually,
questions
I
for me?
wanted to make sure. that we-
Well, one of the things I don't disagree, but you haven't shown that there is an easement. You didn't put any easement on the plan.
On the, across West Shore, the easement on the
No,
other.
across the railroad. You said that you had an easement across the railroad.
Yeah, it's
then-
recorded in land evidence. right?
That's a recorded easement that should certainly be on the plan, and we would certainly do that, and I will reference on the plan the book and page for that easement.
And I think that because you are offering a different site condition, you still need at least to talk to DOT about tying in. Because you are going onto the property to go across.
May I ask if we can
The
have-
2009 physical alteration permit, when it was gone through, probably is not in.
The only thing,
existence.
the only thing different that I may have to look in, even though this was done in 09 with that permit, this was part of the Newport Beach Club application, which was much later. So the DOT may have looked at it then. So we can make sure they do.
Yeah, but still, you just probably want to just call them and ask them, because basically you are tying into a state drainage system.
My understanding is that they required a large culvert to go in under the track between where we're going, and it was installed and permitted, right?
And it's still an active railroad line, so basically it has specific things that have to be done with that culvert?
Well, I certainly know who I'm talking to and know that you know that. So whatever approvals, if you grant them, or recommendations, if you grant them, that require your specific motions on who needs to sign off, we would of course not have any.
No problem.
No, it'll be pavement in the future.
The only thing about calling Seashell Drive is at least everybody knew exactly what we were talking about. So at least for the presentation purposes, it made sense. Well, I think historically, it had been Seashell. And so were all of Carnegie's were Seashell, but seashells they have their downside if delivered on the wrong day.
Yeah.
So that's drainage and the layout. Is there any other, and the sewage? So I think that's all the presentation I have regarding the engineers. Unless you have any questions.
Just things like street lighting, anything like that?
We have, well, we certainly can have Jeremy back up for that. When we were at Design Review Board, we had both Jeremy and our landscape architect. Notice that large tank in what they call the green area where we're putting the underwater detention. That actually looks like a park because it's all grass on top of it. There are some, no backlight lighting, but there's no lighting on this other than the lighting on the sides of houses and some small interior driveway security lighting that is dark
Yeah,
sky.
our
compliant.
preference is to try to minimize site lighting to the degree possible. So usually what we find, because the homes are relatively close to the street, even just the front porch lights are often enough to cast light out to the sidewalks into the street. You see where you're going, right? These aren't 1 acre lots with homes really spread out. So the only reason we would include a site light is if it comes up in the review for a traffic concern, or, you know, at some intersection, we might need a single light post or something. But again, our hope would be to minimize it, certainly dark sky compliant. Again, treat it largely as an architectural approach that usually does the job. So.
And someone walked their dogs at night or stuff, there was talk at Design Review if there was a low light security pole in the green area, in the round part of the street, and in the green area that is the detention. Those are the only really kind of open areas where people would be.
I would hope that the house numbers would be readable. You know, nowadays with so many people having food delivery and all kinds of stuff, you go to these places where buildings are set back and there's hardly any light. And you have no idea, you know, what the house number is. So be a good.
Yeah, so I think that's another thing we would incorporate on the front porches where you'd have the light, you'd be able to see it right adjacent to the door. It should be clear. Yeah, that's another benefit for these not being 100 feet back from the street. You'd be able to see those things and register that.
Yeah, because those houses are getting 60-foot setbacks,
No, well,
30 in the back.
the setbacks, when you have a condominium, your lot is what has the setbacks. So we have setbacks from the areas. So there's 60 feet setbacks from West Shore Road.
Yeah.
And 30 feet from the railroad tracks, and 30 feet from Willow, where it would technically be 60, and 30 feet from, I guess, the back of Elliott. Internally, those driveways, just like you have at Newport Beach Club, where they're all 10 feet apart. I think a fire code is you have to have at least 5 feet between buildings. Our fire department, both at Newport Beach Club and Carnegie Villages, wanted enough to be able to get something through there, because you don't want to create some backyard situations where you can't get emergency gurneys and things. So we've held larger than the minimum 5 feet, obviously, but consistent, and in some cases more than the beach club, for instance. The beach club seems wider sometimes, but those buildings aren't parallel to each other, and often cases they're arced. So the front corners are 10 feet apart and the back are 15.
Yep.
But the alleyway is still less than what we are proposing, or at all points at least consistent. And again, the beach club, you know, I was a skeptic when a lot of this stuff was done on what would work and what wouldn't, but that village at the beach club and the villages at Carnegie seem to be some of the better parts of that development. They've all been the first kind of to fill out. They've been the people that have been most likely to come in as represented as seasonal type of people. They're the ones least likely to be occupied by a whole family type thing. And they seem to be people that come in and are members, which are good for both clubs. And the viability of these clubs is just as important to the club as it is to the town. But and they get assessed high. So although I have others, unless you have any questions, that's really our presentation.
Yes, and Pete?
Yeah, I have a few comments and questions, Mr. Chappelle. Thanks first. For guys like me that haven't been around since '09, the proposed use comments and details, even in areas where you're not asking for variances, is helpful background for me. I was even entertained by, the building heights. You don't have a variance, and I'm thinking, well, we don't count a garage as a floor, so I'm learning stuff too. I could, argue that one, but still think even if you treat it as consistent with residential, it's to me still consistent. So not asking any questions there. I just appreciate that detail.
Here's an interesting detail as it's irony. I need a variance on something that Mike Asiolo found, but I think you never would have thought. In a heavy industry area, the building can only be 2 stories. In everywhere else in town, it can be 2.5.
Yeah.
Our zoning ordinance defines a story a little strange. Our building inspector for 40 years, because I was here with him, says a story is just what you think it is, the first floor. And if you have a knee wall, that's 1.5 stories. Our ordinance says if you've got space up there, that's a story. Even with no knee wall. So there's no such thing as a half story, really, if you'll read it. And it's always been interpreted. But because the hillside units have the bottom and then the floor and then the roof, it's still only 2 stories, but under our ordinance, it's 3. And one of the variances or interpretations we've had to ask for. Now, if you go to Carnegie and look at the 20 units around the tower, there is nothing there that is not 3 large stories.
Yeah.
They're all more than 2 stories and more than what we propose here. But that came up just by interpretation recently.
Yeah.
It's always something.
So then you referenced the design review board comments into from their opinions. You touched on the pedestrian circulation. It sounded like you weren't really particularly didn't feel strongly about incorporating that, but is the petitioner willing to consider that approved?
Petitioner's always willing, but
Sidewalks.
and some of it might be my own personal knowledge of the area. But the purpose of the design review was to have a sidewalk system eventually that tied in so that all people around this town can walk on a sidewalk. And I'm certainly going to give you that on East Main Road and West Main Road, but none of our really neighborhoods really have sidewalks. They've incorporated in the little village, but think about it. You would leave the village and you get on that clamshell road, and that is even though not gated, that is not a high traffic area and extremely low key. And then when you get on to Willow, it's okay to have it there, but would you actually walk on it with Willow being 40 feet wide paved or whatever it is? It really, Willow is the only, if I was to say anywhere in town I don't need a sidewalk from being a runner that's down there, Willow would be it. It is this, it's like Turnpike Avenue now that you have the breakdown lane.
Yeah.
That is this, no one walks on the sidewalk because you have the 12-foot lane. So I personally don't think you need it. I know the developer does what the town asks, but that's rather expensive piece of material to have no beginning and no end because there's no sidewalk getting to it. You can only ask us to do the sidewalk in front of our piece. So it's a sidewalk in space that has a relatively expensive price to it that as a practical matter, I don't believe will be used. So yes, we were asking, and they weren't, I was there and I saw it in writing. It wasn't actually a debated thing. It just said, we like sidewalks. How about sidewalks? And we said, here, they'd be good. So
And if it's not on either side, then I guess I'll pose the question, could it be with the developments on either side? And would it make more sense to have an easement for the town if they wanted to add it
That-
in the future?
That is probably extremely practical.
So that's where I'd say, if are you willing to consider this? That
Oh,
that
the
could be a-
easement's good.
That could be a consideration as opposed to building it out.
The,
I would also suggest the right of way is pretty wide too. So there's already a fair amount of room in the right of way. It's something that there was a desire for a future sidewalk along the road.
Okay,
That's what you're describing. Even on this slide, you can see the white is our property.
right.
You see how much grass there is. It's
Yeah, I
probably
see. Okay.
grass in the property line.
so it may be the town, but we also have said we're gonna set that fence back and we're gonna set the, remember, everybody that has a house here doesn't own to the street. Your mailbox is on town property, you cut that property, you do that. But when we put that fence to match the white fence on the other side, the sidewalk would be outside it. To the extent any of our land is outside that fence, an easement for a sidewalk is certainly.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Certainly on
I'm
the
running
table.
there now. I don't really have the perspective on how much more dense can that area get along that route, so. The other one is on those comments as well from the design review board. They made the, I should, probably inappropriate for me to ask you what their mindset was, but not having been at the meeting, I think I saw, in a sense, where less density, a little bit less footprint overall than what's already been approved. And then I read this and it says the variance requested for the reduction of setback from Willow Lane forces a densely packed townhome development not consistent with the area of the development.
The
somewhat-
discussion on that was, you can see, we're already dense, and let's
Right.
not pretend that we're not, right?
Right.
But that's the nature of this type of development. If you push that on Willow to 60 instead of 30 and kept the number of units. So you got to start with that, because if you pluck off all the units and make this a commercially non-viable situation, that's okay too. But if you push that setback to 60, you push those houses to 30, and then you make everything inside the development much tighter. That was the comments that I recall.
Okay. All right, good.
So I guess what we will do is take a vote.
You want
I'm sorry,
comment from the audience?
okay. I was gonna say, is there,
A request?
yeah, is there any,
Well, if I were, don't let me put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but because this is a kind of a technical review and advisory to the special use permit, it would be nice to be able to comment on the less density, but I think everybody will know that. But ultimately, it's a request for a favorable recommendation. And I think particularly they wanted to see that you looked at radii of road and road width and drainage and the septic, because that's usually the purview of what the zoning board sends to you. So a favorable recommendation with that. If they come up with any other issues on that type of things, they have the right to send it back to quite frankly, a board full of engineers and people that see that more than they do. Not that they don't see it, but they usually leave roads and subdivisions to you. They also in zoning petitions set boards, similar, set bonds, when you have a condo. That would be similar to the bonds that you set for subdivisions and things. We don't have all of those numbers tonight, but if you can put in your recommendation that they have any concern with the bonds and whether they are consistent with a bond that's normally set by you for roads and those things that will return to get the bond amount approved. I'd like consistency between the boards, as you know, I'm constantly arguing. I think that similar types of issues should be handled consistently. So if they don't do bonds as a rule, because I've been there a long time, I don't even remember the last condo approvals, it's been a while. Oakland Farms might be the last one for a large project. So if they need help with the bond, we'll come back here as well.
So I just need to know if there's any public opinion or anybody online or anybody in the audience.
I don't know, Gerard.
Again, if there's anyone using the Zoom function at home, you can use the raise hand function to give public comment or dial, if you're called in, dial *9.
Okay, so I guess we're going to individually vote on giving a favorable opinion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before we do that, I think consistent with the last petition, if I could just make a motion to incorporate 3 exhibits, the design review board minutes of December 8th as exhibit 1 into the record, the proposed use of the property background comments, I call that exhibit 2, and then the town submission drawings from the petitioner is exhibit 3. You're saying including reference to easement changes?
My notes would be that we would, that there's a recommendation that we
Including-
reference the easement and that
Thank you.
we make sure any requirements of DOT be placed in writing and in the land evidence records, that we satisfy them and they be recorded.
So including those notes to the easement.
So you're saying, Brian, your motion is to
Just
include these items into the record.
right. It's just,
Right?
I'm
It's
just
not an approval. We're
correct.
not making recommendations.
Correct. This is not I'm not making the motion to the zoning board.
Okay, so the last part about the easement, how does that fit in here?
It should be listed on the plan,
Okay.
shown on the plan,
Okay.
and then DOT probably should be here.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
If
that,
it's just
that
the
might be part
record-
of the motion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So I take that back. I think Dee Dee's right. So at this
Consistent.
time, I am making the motion to have the 3 exhibits as stated without any, as they were submitted. Okay. As exhibits. We'll make a motion. for that.
Okay. And Seth seconded that motion. So with that, we give our approval, so Seth, yours is it? Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Tibbetts?
I
Yep. So, and I as well say aye, so it passes. Our opinion. It's all favorable. So we will be sending a favorable opinion.
No,
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that was the motion to include those items in the record and to request that we file an amended petition or amended plan that includes the easement. I think that's what was just approved. And now
Okay.
if
so,
you are to approve, we need a motion.
so we're complete with that. I'll go ahead and make the following motion to make a favorable advisory opinion to the zoning board regarding the proposed modification and variance to the special use permit, including road width, setback, septic, and considering exhibits 1, 2, and 3, and providing for in this exhibit the easement clarification as discussed. Do I need to clarify that more? Okay, that's it. On exhibit 3 plans, specific to the easement discussion.
And any approval be subject to DOT approval specifically, as well, quite frankly, as coastal resources. Because I think that's on the record too.
And is
That's the
there-
motion.
Okay. So we.
Aye.
Mr. Tibbet,
Aye.
Ms. Wilson,
Aye.
Mr. Verso. And Mr. O'Connell. Aye. And I vote aye.
Thank you. No pressure on a secretary. Unfortunately, we are on next Thursday. So whatever letter that normally goes with this would respectfully be asked for by that day if possible.
Okay. You heard that, Leon?
Okay.
All right. We'll give them a minute
So,
just to
yeah,
clear
Were
out.
they, Luke, were they asking for consideration that the decision can be
They
approved to
just
make it
would
to
like
Thursday?
the positive opinion from the planning board for this Thursday for their zoning meeting.
Zoning hearing is next Thursday.
So they just want our thumbs up.
I'm just wondering if they need the official.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to come back here. Leon can write it.
All right.
Okay, next petitioner is number 5 applicant owner Michael and Mary Zani, is that correct? Zani. AP1 lots 55 and 56, concept review to add land to lot 56 from lot 55. So the development of lot 55 can proceed with minimal variance. Looks like it's Mr. Chappelle again.
Hi, thank you. Mike and Conley Zani from 1350 Anthony Road.
Thank you.
All your administrative subdivision.
Can we close the door?
It's actually 4 or 5 lots. So the common point, the lot 1 has 3 lots. And 2 lots, so that's lot 5. But if you own these lots side by side, and one lot is smaller than the other, and I move add land to one, I can do that as long as I don't make for as long as I don't make one non-conforming, or as long as I don't make one of them not conforming. So the problem is that the Zanis own the house, the larger lot to the south that their house is on. They also own the lot that has a garage on it. Now, normally, they don't come separately, but in this particular case, we're kind of fixing a sin of the past. Don't know if everybody knows it here unless you sit on the zoning board, but if I have a single family lot in a residential zone, I cannot build a garage on it unless I have a house. The reason I can't put a garage on it is a garage is only allowed as an accessory use. I can't have an accessory use if I don't have a house. Sins of the past are that we bent the rules a little bit. And if I owned a lot next door that was contiguous to me, I could go to the building inspector and say, it's a contiguous lot, can I build a garage on it? What should happen, if that happens, is I have to file a merger petition to make them the same so that it's one lot, so that I have a garage on an accessory. It really got bastardized when the gentleman across the street came and said, I want to build a garage on a lot that's not contiguous with me, but the one across the paper street. That garage got built. That's the garage we're talking about. So the Zanis own their own home that has no problems whatsoever, requires no zoning, there's no additions to it, nothing's going on. And then they own this garage lot that's a pre-existing non-conforming accessory use on a single family lot that also doesn't meet some setbacks. Your mom, your parents, right?
My mom.
Mom's parents are trying to move there. So they are trying to renovate the garage or remove the garage and to build a small, single family there. It's possible. It's always possible on 5,400 or square feet or so, but it's a little bit of an irregular shaped lot and it would require some variances. So rather than require some variances, they looked at their lot and said, if we just add land from ours, you can have a house that has a 2-car garage and we can get it there and we can be no closer to the neighbor on the north side where we're already encroaching, and everything else requires no variance. We won't need a lot coverage variance. We won't need height variances. We won't need front yard, rear yards, or sides. And because we're getting no closer to where we already are, that makes more sense than going in and saying, can I have a north, south, east, and west variance? I got the land. Let's make 2 pretty good. Neil Hignorani drew it for us, and we tried to draw it in a way so that when we took a little land off the Zani's main house, their house would still be 100% conforming. When we did, we were right on the nut at 20%. Then a spiral staircase came in to get down from the back. And I think when we go back to the zoning board, I believe it's a 0.5% variance that we are going to need. So ultimately, we're just showing you that I believe this just makes sense. We can have 2 that are more conforming. We're going to eliminate an accessory use on a garage that was built for the guy across the street, which makes no sense. And it's already taxed as 2 completely separate different lots anyway. Leon, being thorough, said, by the way, when you come back to the planning board, rather than just make these 2 lots, let's merge what I call the second lot is 2 lots, and what I call the first lot is 3 lots. Let's be thorough and merge the 3 that the house are on into 1, merge the 2 that the other are going to be on into 1. And then with these short variances, I'll be able to do it as a subdivision. He can't do it now because it would require zoning relief. We go get the zoning relief. It should work. So I think it makes the situation better. The variances we would be requiring at the zoning board are set out, I think, in our petition, but we have another one of those double front yards because of the paper street. So we meet the front line of Anthony, we meet that, we meet the rear yard, we meet the side yard, but the pre-existing side, the current structure is 4.5 feet away now. We move it to 5, it's a little better, but it's still less than the 10 feet required in an R10. Remember the last petition in industrial was 30 for a side yard, but in a R10, it's 10 feet. So we'll be looking for a 5-foot side yard variance and then under 1% lot coverage variances on both lots. If we don't do this division, we need a 5 on the north, a 5 on the south, a 25% lot coverage, which is precedent that we all try to stay away from. I think it just makes more sense. And again, it's really here for conceptual. I don't even know if it requires anything except, I guess I'm hoping that you like it enough to let me know so that if I go to the zoning board and get the variances and come back to you for the planning board's subdivision, you don't look at me and go, why'd you do that? We're not going to approve it. That's why it's on for conceptual. So I don't even know really yet if you need a formal vote.
Now, there's no formal vote for concept, but let's see if any of the members, are you done, Court?
Yes.
Any of the members have questions?
Just one, you're gonna need a survey stamp on your plan when you're done.
Yes, certainly we do. I would assume. I don't know that we have it, but I know. Oh,
Yeah,
we may have made copies of the real plan that aren't big enough to give you the title block, but I think it's cut off. Certainly, I know we need a survey plan and actually need to install boundary markers if approved. So thank you. And again, it's Neil's office from Narragansett Engineering has prepared everything for the Xannies.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
I can't see
Yes,
myself on the screen, but
We have, according to Neil, we have passing water tables. In theory, if we were, I will have them for you. In theory, if we were creating a lot, that is a prerequisite on your subdivision checklist. These lots already exist. But we would not be able to draw a building permit without demonstrating to the building department that we not only have a passable water table, but a approved design. And that is how this started, because they were talking about asking for an in-law apartment and put an approved design. And by the time we moved the system over to the new lot and added some land for it, it made sense just to make it, doesn't make tax sense because you pay more for an individual house lot than you do for mom's apartment over the garage, which you can get permitted, but it certainly is better for resale and it just made more sense. That's accurate. That's
That's
pretty
accurate,
much
yeah.
what we talked about. Right?
Any questions on this side?
I had a question. Would the abutters would have a chance to have an opinion at the zoning?
The zoning board is full notice to everybody within 200 feet, and they absolutely have the ability to be there and to contest or to show approval. I happen to know we have some letters of approval with us, but it is fair to say everybody is duly notified and they will have the opportunity.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Kevin.
well, I'm a little confused about this procedurally. It's on for concept review, but for an administrative subdivision that requires variances, I believe the regs require it to be treated as a application for a major subdivision, which requires notice to butters at the planning board level. And then any approvals are conditioned upon going to the zoning board for the granting of variances. So I'm not sure procedurally if this is, the proper route. I mean, on concept plan review, I mean, I think there should be an application, as far as I know, it should be an application for administrative subdivision that requires variances, which the regulations require be treated as an application for a major subdivision, which requires the starting, master plan, preliminary and final, and notice to abutters.
Mr. Chappelle?
Well, I'll be happy to talk to Kevin about that, but not certainly my opinion. I know where he's
We're here on a
coming.
concept plan that requires no vote or anything, but it seems like we're talking bypass.
I don't want to argue with it. All I'm going to tell you is
Okay, thank you.
that position comes, we've done administrative subdivisions like this for 30 years. What the administrative subdivision ordinance says is they can grant an administrative subdivision that is allowed by zoning. When I go to zoning and get the variance, I'm not here for an administrative subdivision. I'm just telling you, if I come back, it will be an administrative subdivision because it will be allowed by zoning because the approvals will be done. What the narrow way we looked at it, and we have addressed this a couple of times in the last couple of months, Kevin, I'll talk to you about it, but if you read the subdivision regs, they say an administrative subdivision is one that you don't need zoning relief. Now, again, we will have already had zoning relief, so we wouldn't need further when it came here. And then it says a major subdivision is this many lots and a minor is this. And then it says all subdivisions, all other subdivisions are major subdivisions. So in theory, if I have two lots that have houses on them and there's a boundary dispute and they're non-conforming lots, and I want to give my neighbor 6 inches of land, because they're non-conforming, it by definition makes one 6 inches more conforming and one 6 inches less conforming. If the zoning board approves that that is okay, it can be done administratively. If you look at it the way Kev's looking at it, and I thought we hashed this out, this came up in the Norm Siebens petition that we did just like this. But if you look at it narrowly, even that simple 6 inches of land is an administrative subdivision with no zoning relief required. If the answer is yes, then it's a major. That doesn't make sense. So the position is You can't do it as an administrative because it requires zoning relief. I get it. If you get the zoning relief in advance, does it require zoning relief? No, I already got the zoning relief.
Why is there a concept review? Where does that fit into this process?
The concept review is Court Chappelle's courtesy that I am never going to be so arrogant to go to a zoning board and ask to create a lot that I haven't brought to the attention of the planning board and at least got some feedback that I don't know why you did this because we wouldn't have done this. So you're not approving it, but I'm just here telling you, this is kind of what I think should be done, and we'll be back doing it when I think it's legal. Now, Kev, when I come back, if your opinion is that it's still illegal, then you're not going to let them proceed anyway. But again, this has come up twice this year and we've done it this way. So I'm a little confused, quite frankly. Because it came up, your exact opinion came up with Mike and I on 2 other petitions and we did them this way. So, but you can look at that. And it's hard to explain, but a major subdivision is everything that's not an administrative subdivision. It doesn't say it's major, like it's important or major, it's 5 lots. It's a major subdivision if it doesn't fit in this box. And the only reason this would fit in that box is because an administrative subdivision can't require zoning relief at the time it's approved. And the semantics that I'm using is when I come back to you for an administrative subdivision, it will require no zoning relief at the time it's approved because there'll be zoning relief put on it in advance conditionally. And again, this, I think, Kev, will be the 3rd time this year, or not this year because it's January or February 22. 3rd time in calendar year, in 365 days we've done this.
Anything else, Mr. Solicitor?
We're out here on a concept review where there's no vote or anything, so I just have to say I don't recall the other instances that court is.
I'll call you, Kev. I didn't know that you weren't.
It's up to the board to decide.
I know Leon and Mike know what I'm talking about, but I get it. I
Well,
will.
there's no vote or anything. I just want to point out what I don't understand. It seems like the procedure, it might be a little irregular here, and you can't circumvent the things by just saying, okay, we were before the planning board on concept, so they're all set with this zoning board, and follow the regs, is what I'm saying.
Again, we're on for Thursday and you can figure it out between now and then, but I said we wouldn't be representing to the zoning board that.
There's no vote or approval going to be.
I get it. I'm not representing to them that I approved it. I'm representing to them that it's a good plan and would they approve it if the planning board approves it? And then I'm coming back and saying, they approved it. Now you have a choice of whether to approve it, but you're not seeing it for the first time.
Okay, that's very
all.
creative. That's very creative.
Okay, any other comments from any members of the board? Right, you heard the concerns, you heard the comments and the solicitor's comments, so obviously we don't take a vote on a concept plan.
And I get it. And ultimately, this board may decide how to handle this language of major subdivision. And I'll put it in a letter form for you so that you understand it when I come back, instead, again, it kind of winged on you, but it's not really complicated. Is this what the legislator intended to turn everything into? I mean, how could you move a line 6 inches and call it a major as opposed to a minor, for instance? I mean, it doesn't, everybody says it doesn't make sense, but literal meanings, Kevin's absolutely correct that is the position a literalist will take on it. And the position I take is taken in other towns as well. It's not unique. This is a state legislation ordinance, so it happens everywhere, right? But your town can vote, this is the way I'm going to handle them, or interpret it, this is the way I'm not going to interpret it. And obviously, you should listen to your solicitor. So I'm hoping to shape him a little, his opinion if he hasn't seen it. I thought he saw it when I had these conversations with other members of the department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chappelle. Okay. Next up is Applicant West Shore Road LLC, owner Carnegie Trails LLC, AP 26, Lot 13, 226 West Shore Road. Approved final plan. Strike the word decision. That was a typo in the agenda. Approved final plan for the development of a large-scale solar project. I believe it's Mr. Chappelle, and I will also be turning this over to Mr. Harding as I continue my recusal on this petition.
I know you're sick of me, so I'm gonna leave quickly.
You should at least get like a different mask.
Yeah.
Come on.
And I don't even mean to be a wise guy, but it's ultimately preliminary approval for these projects is the vote. And we come back on final and we show you that we change the plans in accordance with your recommendations. And we accepted all of your recommendations. The plans have been submitted with all changes. The major thing for the final plan was, if you recall, the fire department wanted a second gate.
Yep.
And we went back to the fire department, made sure they wanted a second gate, asked for specific location of the second gate. They want to pick or have input on the location of the second gate, but kind of want the site development to start because they want to pick the area that's going to have access, and they want to see whether it goes back on that, how much room they're going to have to swing in. So the plan reflects that a second gate will go at the request of, at the location as designed, as desired by the police, by the fire department, but hasn't actually been drawn on in that accurate location. And any final approval would be subject to the fire department's final signing off, which would make that a condition anyway. So other than that, everything is identical from what we told you. The only other issue that would generally done at bond would be at this final stage is to set the bond, and in your package was the amount that was proposed. I think we amended that slightly. I'm gonna scrap the, get rid of the scrap line.
12,000 panels. It's more than that.
I'm not letting it- anyone about paying $100 a piece. or whatever. What are we using? That's not. It's in your pack. Was it because? I'm sorry, wait, this was, it was in the original. Well, let me put it on the record. So. a little bit of an issue.
You know of any spot where that bond is?
In the original application, that was included. Anyway, I can do it again because we have a cost of it. When I swear Andrew in, and I'll put him on, and I'll just have him do it. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Andrew Bernstein from Kearsarge Energy will be the developer and the operator of the project.
And Andrew, you're familiar with the bonds?
Yes.
We've set these before.
Yeah, we've had 5 or 6 other sites in Rhode Island, 18 in Massachusetts, and 3 in New York.
So the purpose of this bond is to set amount of money first under today's cost that it would be to what we call decommission. And that would be
Correct.
to remove the panels and the transformers and the wiring and to restore loom and seed. Is that right?
Right.
And how is it that you go about getting costs for this?
We get an independent engineer who certifies this. In this case, we used industrial engineering, which has done several. They look at labor costs, restore and loom and seed, equipment and shipping. Then they offset it with a scrap value, less any of the cost of material separations. And And then they look at it in 25 years to see what the cost will be. And we came back with a number of, in 25 years, it would be $83,490. They use.
Let me
oh,
just
sorry.
answer it this way. What's today's cost?
Today's cost is a negative amount of money.
And again.
It's because the panels today, we're gonna pay for 44 cents. And the panels, so I actually lowered the price because it would have been negative in 25 years because the cost of the panels. So what's making up the scrap value, you're absolutely right, is the panels, the transformers. So in today's value, the panels would be worth, even at scrap value, 283,000. We're gonna pay at 39 cents, but that's basically assuming it's at 4 cents. In today, if we bought them and tried to resell them, we can resell them. There's a shortage of panels, so we can resell them for higher than we paid for them. But so in 25 years, it's 157,000 for the panels. Transformers, we marked down to $4,000. Copper, which is a major component, the string wiring, is 125,000. And then you have to subtract what's the cost of separating it for 150,000. So that's gives you a negative variance of 137,000 for the scrap value, offset by the labor costs and the loom.
And interesting is, here I am, I never anticipated that the landowner would be in any conflict with the developer. But if they go south and the bond goes, that would be me.
Yeah.
So I do need that bond to be set, and I have raised the issues of scrap, because scrap today compared to scrap 25 years from now, I know a lot of things that have value today that have no value today that had value 25 years ago, and vice versa. So ultimately, you have to do it. I will also tell you, when you tell the rate, our ordinance that we wrote says you're to get today's rate, and you're to also up it by 10% for inflation. So it's a number that you're comfortable with, could take it down if there was a walk away today, plus 10%, plus any type of conservative scrap value you want to do on it. Andrew had adjusted those for us, which satisfies me. That doesn't mean it satisfies you, but ultimately it's a bond in the amount of $83,490. And today's actual cost to take it down would be $170,000. So that gives him some type of $80,000 credit for scrap, where originally he had, 300,000. Not that he was going to a negative number, but he had the scrap value. But a guy that looks and sells these for a living thinks higher. I get that copper probably is going to be just as valuable in 25 years, but just a number, that was why. And you can pick a round number, but that 83,000, certainly 83 to 125 is a number that, at least from a landowner, I can live with. But it's ultimately up to you. And I don't know how you just set a bond, I believe, on a final. And I believe consistency is important. And I don't know if that one had any scrap value. I heard it did, but I don't know the amount. So anything consistent with past practice, and we're ready to go. But our proposal is $83,490, which is the full number today, plus 10%, minus half of what you wanted for scrap value.
Right. And I told court, I said, we're happy to, in 10 years, be required to get another independent engineer to evaluate it. And then if it's more, we'll raise it.
I actually think if I was writing the state ordinance and smart enough to be the neighbor, I might do that. I don't think anything you try to project 25 years is a little difficult. It's difficult. The town bonds for a road are pretty easy, because you're putting them in now, and you're generally going to be putting them in within a year. What killed us on some of those road bonds is a tolling statute that allowed us to put in things 14 years after we set prices and now it was $180 a foot instead of 100. But this, we're actually trying to predict what's happening in 25 years, and isn't this year's inflation already half of 10%? So I don't really know the answer. So if you set this for 10 years, then that scrap value to set it at $83,000 is more than enough for me, because in the next 10 years, I think we conservatively can predict some scrap value. If you make it that we have to come back to set a bond, which is Andrew's offer, I think that's actually better than the ordinance is drafted, more of a burden on us that's actually accepted.
Sure. That's fine too. We just for information, so we've been doing this for 12 years. So our first project, we paid 76 cents for panels. Those same panels today are probably worth about 25 cents. So for these, we're valuing them at 1.5 cents, just to be conservative, because panels are just steel and glass. So it's the cost of the separation of them.
I guess my request would be to seek final approval with a bond set at 84,000
Yeah.
with the ability to review 10 years. And that can be a town requirement or at the request of a landowner, because I'm pretty much going to be a better police department than you.
Okay.
If you really want to know, but I'm not trying to take it out of the purview of anybody in the town. I think if you start looking at things and saying these bonds seem to be less, you'd call in all solars if you could. At least ours, you've specifically reserved the right to do that. There are 25-year leases in the life cycle. So, but in 10 years, you'll know what a 10-year price is, what labor and cost are then, and certainly more accurately, the resale value or the recycle value.
Michael, is there anybody here in the audience now or anybody online that would like to speak on this matter?
Anyone on Zoom or through the call-in that would like to give their public comment, you can use the raise hand function in the Zoom app or dial *9 if you're called in.
Anybody? Okay, so I guess, oops, yeah. I guess we're gonna vote on somebody want to make the motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion then to grant final plan approval for the development of large-scale solar project, setting the bond value at $84,000 with the requirement to reevaluate that bond value in 10 years for the remaining 15-year life cycle.
And that would be subject to the landowner
Or the town.
or
petition.
the town to adjust the bond if it has.
I'm just saying it's a requirement for the petitioner, so I don't know that
Okay,
whether I
Yeah.
need to add that.
fair enough. If you make it a requirement of petitioner, we'll just diary it and do it.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
We'll just diary it and do it. Even if we're coming and saying, hey, it's overestimated, we don't need it,
Right.
we'll report. Right.
We'll get another independent engineer in 10 years.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. All right, so we'll take this vote. Mr. Blunt?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And I as well.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you.
a long evening. I know you're not done, but I appreciate everything.
Okay, this next one. The applicant owner, WC Coastal Development LLC, AP 43, lots 3 and 4, AP 50, lot 6 and 7, concept plan and review for the Marine Village at Weaver Cove.
And Mr. Chair, Ed Lopes here. I'm going to enter my recusal for this petition as well due to my relationship.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Gerard Galvin from Galvin Law in Newport, Rhode Island. I do live here in Portsmouth. However, I represent WC Coastal Development LLC, and we're here tonight for a concept plan review for the development of a marina village at Weaver Cove. We're excited to share our initial vision and look forward to hearing your thoughts and input as we continue to progress and work towards submitting a formal application with the town. To begin, I want to introduce the entity and some of the entities involved with this development. This is a joint venture of the Karam family and the Marshall family. Both have deep roots in Rhode Island and the business community here. Most recently, this team together developed a 280 hotel room in hotel in Boston and 350,000 square foot open air community shopping center. The Karam Families Corporation is First Bristol Corp, and that was founded over 40 years ago by James Karam, who is the current chairman of the corporation. It has developed over 4.5 million square feet of residential, hotel, office, and retail properties throughout the Northeast. Its founder and chairman resides in Tiverton, Rhode Island, and the company's developed numerous projects throughout Rhode Island, including local hotels in Middletown, such as the Residence Inn, Homewood Suites, and the Hampton Inn. And very recently, First Bristol was part of the team selected by the Middletown Town Council to redevelop 15 acres of land on West Main Road and convert it into a mixed-use town center. Several of the Karams, the children in the Karam family attend St. Philomena's School. So the family is invested in the community here, and in particular, this area of Portsmouth. The Marshall family has been a family-owned business in operation for over 30 years. Its headquarters is in East Providence. It develops, owns, and manages real estate, including retail, Class A office building space, military housing, hotels, and storage. And they most recently have developed an 80,000 square foot medical building in East Providence. Before we dive into the site plan, it's important that we talk a little bit about the context of the site. The development site covers several lots. These lots are brownfields or Superfund sites. The property had been used as a fueling station for the Navy for many, many decades, from about 1900 through the 1970s. Since that time, the EPA, in conjunction with the Navy and Rhode Island DEM, has undertaken some remediation steps dealing with environmental hazards there. However, there's much work left to be done. And this developer is intending on undertaking that remediation. Currently, the majority of the project site is vacant with remnant pavement and fencing from the prior uses. So if approved, this project will result in a cleaner and healthier environment and a substantial improvement to the subject property. There have been various efforts in the past to develop this parcel of land. And we understand that what we're proposing here can be seen as a big project. But there have been several prior applications and even approvals at this site for development far in excess of what we are proposing. In 2008, this Portsmouth Planning Board approved a master plan application for a 1,495 slip marina with associated residential and marine buildings. That plan did not advance from that point. And subsequently, there were other proposals which included up to 1,100 residential units. So by those standards of projects that had advanced through at least some degree of approval, what we're proposing here, at least initially, with approximately 400 residential units and 350 slip marina, is a much smaller scale. We're not looking to achieve maximum density on this site. What we're looking to achieve is a marina village in the model set forth in the code for a planned marina village development. In such a development under your code, there has to be a marina of proportional size to the land side of the development. And we believe this marina that's being proposed will meet that requirement. Additional permitted uses in the planned marina development include apartments, homes, townhomes, as long as 10% of those units will be affordable. And we're aware of that requirement, and that will certainly be part of the plan as we advance. Additional permitted uses in these in this development are retail and service businesses, restaurants, and office space. And all of these uses will be part of the proposal. And in a minute, I'll bring Lynn Small up, who will walk you through the site plan. But there were a few additional items that I wanted to run through that are important elements of the proposal that bear some special emphasis. First, I mentioned the low to moderate income housing requirement that we're aware of will certainly be part of the plan. We're also aware of the potential that there's a requirement that this development add even additional affordable housing based on a requirement that a prior owner had put on this property. So we're aware of that. We'll be looking into that. If that's a requirement, we'll be dealing with that in the application. Additionally, you're aware that there's important public access to the water at Weaver Cove currently. That will be maintained. There will be additional parking provided. A public restroom is part of this proposal at this time. A coastal greenway is an important part of this proposal, which will provide the public with additional access to the shoreline. These plans have all been reviewed by town staff, CRMC staff, and other major stakeholders here in the town administrator, and other folks from around the state level of administrative agencies, state government. All have had very positive feedback about the vision for the property. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more from the town staff as we advance through the process. Additionally, we've been in contact with the abutters and the neighbors to this property. They've reviewed the plans and they've had positive feedback as well about the proposal. And so the intent here is to create an aesthetic of a coastal New England shingled look. Obviously, before we come back before you with a formal application, we'll be in front of the design review board and we'll be getting their input. But we very much look forward to this opportunity tonight to walk through the plan with you and solicit any input, questions, comments you have, so we can take that with us and incorporate those thoughts as we prepare our application. So unless there's any questions for me at the moment, I'll ask Lynn Small to come up and maybe just walk you through the site plan, which you may all have a copy of.
Good evening, Lynn Small, Northeast Engineers, 6 Valley Road. The site you see before you, this is known as a Weaver Cove project. We've had proposals in front of the planning board before for this. So you might be somewhat familiar with it, depending on how long you've been here. This is a planned unit development, as Gerard has explained. So we're offering or planning to have a variety of different housing types and some commercial pieces, public amenities, a coastal improvement that'll include a walking path for the public, parking, bathrooms will be available. We've divided, the site is divided both by Burma Road. We have a portion of the site that's uphill from Burma Road. Up there, we have apartment type units. That portion of the site has a substantial grade change. So the designs are going to be a little bit challenging. We were going to have a longer and narrower structure with some structured parking. All of this will be compliant with the PUD that's in place. But we're envisioning that we have 2 curb cuts there where we pull the people who will be using those units off of Burma Road. They'll have internal parking and circulation and exit or enter at only 2 points onto the Burma Road. Then we have a central section that's located between Burma Road and the railway, which also bisects the property. This will be a mixture. We're envisioning it as a mixture of some commercial uses towards the north end, which is closer to the Hinckley development. And then as you come south, we'll try to incorporate some townhouse type styles. Obviously, it's very conceptual right now because we haven't done any of the grading associated with the site, but we'll have to be using the existing topography and the existing site constraints that'll kind of tell us what kind of house units we'll have for these. But right now we're envisioning a townhouse type style right there. That this piece of the property is very, very narrow as you get down to the south end. And we're envisioning that it mostly includes just your overflow parking areas. We also, in this section of land, have the challenge of working with some Navy utilities. There's a sewer line in there. There's some water lines. We'll be working with them to maintain the ones that are actively used and then remove the ones or abandon the ones that are no longer in use. We are proposing that we do a railroad crossing in this northern end. This will provide access to the southern coastal side of the site, which is the southern abutter to the Hinckley development. This will be mostly where we keep the commercial portions of the project. You'll have your, if there's any retail and office space, we might have some there, probably a restaurant. You'll have access to the marina. There'll be some bathrooms available, parking, and then maybe some elevated residential. Again, we have buildings shown on the plans as placeholders, but as we get further into the designs, we'll be able to figure out what we're going to do for actual structures. If there's any flat area of the site, this is the flat area. So we have a little bit of ability to work with different styles, but then we also have the challenge of the velocity zone over here. So we'll have to have that lifted up and maybe have some structured parking underneath. The idea is to try to minimize what kind of impervious surfaces we have, but still provide enough of parking and circulation that's safe for the overall development. The southern coastal side is you have an existing access railroad crossing right now that gets you to the boat ramp, which you probably have all crossed at one point. This is going to be predominantly residential. We'll still have the public access path, but it's a very, very narrow strip of land. So it basically lends itself to longer, skinnier buildings. It's in a floodplain, so they'll be elevated. We'll have parking underneath. And on the coastal side of the buildings, we're planning to have your public access walkway that then goes towards your coastline. On the plan that you see on the monitors, there's a thicker red dashed line that represents the floodplains, but then you can see the coastal area, which is the yellowish area. That's your buffers that are going to be we're subject to for CRMC from the coast. So we'll be having a 50-foot greenway, which will be vegetated. We'll have a walking path within that area. Might have some sitting areas. We're not sure. We'll develop those features both with you and the CRMC for this project. We've made the submission to CRMC for a preliminary determination and hope to get their conceptual feedback so that we can incorporate it as we move further into the designs for the development. Unlike most of the projects in Portsmouth, this has public sewer. And we have public water, electric, and I believe gas is out there as well. So we have those utilities readily available, which we will be connecting into. We have the rights to connect into the Navy sewer and the water already. That's an agreement in place. We just have to put the conveyance into the pump station. In fact, the pump station is on this property, so it makes it a little bit easier to tie into. So that's basically a overall summary of what we're thinking at this point. And we're hoping to get some of your feedback.
It says 50-foot coastal greenway, so this basically is a public access kind of stop at that first year, at the first marina, is that the intention, right? Or is it the whole like path? That's public?
The whole path, the CRMC requires that we provide a path during the whole length of the coastal area. The only part that's difficult for us to do a continuous path is where we have this area kind of, it's shown as the bright green. That's actually the water. That's like the wetland area, and it kind of creates a big gap. So we've provided the public access path on both sides. And that's what we're proposing at this point. Hopefully that'll be acceptable by CRMC.
That's great. No, that's awesome. We both could connect them. So is that current road where you access the boat ramp, is that a town road? That where it crosses the railroad track, that road right there?
I would have to check our survey background to see if that's a town road. I do know that we're required to maintain it or continue that pass through.
It looks like you're modifying like the path of it slightly.
We're modifying its layout once it's inside the lot.
Yeah.
But we're not modifying the crossing itself. So the crossing remains, but we're required to continue that access because that's your access to the boat ramp
Right. Well,
and that
that's kinda what I was
parking.
getting at, because like in all hours, there's like a lot of boat traffic.
Mhm.
And it looks like, you have all these 34 parking spaces. Is that, looks like it's like a little bit of a pedestrian conflict in that area. So I don't know if there's anything that all that shifting the road. To keep the parking spaces on the same side as the.
Yeah, the difficulty we have there is the narrowness of the site.
Right.
But what I can say is that we have structured parking underneath the buildings for the people who will be living in the residence. So those parking spaces are really for overflow and use during the day for the public, but we'll look into that.
And then what about like, as far as like, that's a pretty well used, like everything.
That's good.
Yeah, no, it's good. Is that kind of how you're gonna be, like, you're gonna maintain that during construction?
I think we're required to, if I understand, we have to keep that access available.
There's always been over the years, the thoughts of the bike path next to the railroad tracks. Is there any consideration or problems if that did come to fruition?
I don't think so. Our crossings are going to be minimal. You'll have the existing crossing. And if the DOT wants to pursue that path and that improvement, then, we're not opposed to it.
Okay. And touching the subject, excuse me, of the affordable housing. It was in all the development, you probably remember it, that every time Carnegie was doing something and we were looking for the 10%, everything got kicked down to Weaver Cove as part of the deal, and I'm not sure. It's good that they brought it up and acknowledge it and all that stuff. I just don't know what the final number that was agreed upon and if that went with the sale of the property.
It did. It is deeded to this property, so we don't have any option but to maintain it. The numbers, I don't know offhand. I don't know if Gerard knows, but they are here.
Yeah.
It's like 6 or 7 units, and they were a piece of the Beach Club, the Newport Beach Club project.
Yeah.
Those were transferred to this. At the time, they thought both projects would move forward. You know, it never was expected that this one kind of would sit dormant for so long.
Right.
But then any additional units that are required as a result of this project would
Will be added to
be
the
added to
7.
that.
Just a reminder to the board, just remember to turn your microphone on when you're speaking and speaking into the microphone.
Yep. But so it's 7 from the sins of the past and then plus 10%.
6 or
of what's
7,
current.
right, from
Okay.
sins of the past,
We'll-
yes.
We'll confirm exactly, we'll
Okay.
confirm exactly what that is. And that'll be,
In the
discussed
plan.
in detail, I'm sure. Once we're back.
Thank
the
you.
application in.
Thanks.
But just a comment, and I guess as a Portsmouth resident, thanks for the public amenities, you know, restaurants and walkways, but I appreciate too that you're probably underscoring that I used to represent the Navy Public Works side of this, so I imagine that there's, you know, a lot of challenges with the sewer water distribution, but as well with the road, you know, Burma Road infrastructure, I can see increased pedestrian, you know, traffic on easements on either side there and the cycle traffic. And now I'm a tenant to that organization, so I'm familiar still with the challenges getting them to mill and pave, you know, and keep that road safe. So I don't know if those are, you know, I'm assuming that's all part of your conversations as well. Because obviously you're a major stakeholder to that now and invested, but you can't, at the same time, you can't do anything about it. You're sort of like me as a tenant
Yeah,
now, so just a comment.
yeah. No, we have some decent contacts with the Navy, so we're able to get information as we need it, but sometimes it's hit or miss too on what you, but we're working through everything to make sure we can make this project work for everyone. There's other developments north of this that are dependent on those sewer and water lines, so we can't just get rid of them.
Okay, so is there anybody in the audience that maybe has a comment that, or anybody on the phone?
Again, if you're using the Zoom app and you'd like to give public comment, you can use the raise hand function, or if you dialed in, you can use *9.
Okay. Well.
Well, nothing more, no vote or particular request. It's really just an opportunity for us to, have you see sort of a first rendering of the vision here. It's going to be refined. It's conceptual. The number of units might change a little bit. Locations might change a little bit, but this is generally what, the vision that we're going to be advancing. This is an opportunity for us to try to take, some of the points you raised and look into those issues a little bit more before we put our application together. And we look forward to coming back before you. We'll be continuing discussions with the staff. So if something pops into your head that you want to relay to Mike, we'll certainly take as much input as we can to make this a good application.
Thank you. I myself personally am very happy to see this, so at least that's one person.
All right, great. So unless there's any other questions, I just want to thank you for your time tonight. I know it's a late night, so we appreciate you staying late and hearing us through.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All right, last on our agenda is item 8, the monthly project status report on administrative subdivisions, plat plan recording. What's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to accept the status reports, subdivisions and plat plan recordings and place into the record.
Kevin.
So we had Brian first, Dave Garso second. Okay, motion made and second. Any discussion? All in favor, we'll say aye.
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 Looks like it's unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, could we get a motion to adjourn? There we go. Excellent, thank you.
Welcome aboard, Chris.
Well, it's not low income, it's affordable housing. That's two different things. This is affordable housing. Last time we had a discussion on that, it was like, if it was a single person, they'd have to afford a mortgage of like, like then it was like $175,000. And if it was a